Coming up in our newscast tonight. Seoul's top court orders Japan's Nippon Steel and Sumitomo Metal to compensate 4 South Koreans for wartime forced labor and unpaid work. The ruling provides effective closure to a case that began more than a decade ago. President Moon Jae-in is on a nationwide tour to boost local economies. In Jeollabuk-do Province, he attends a special ceremony in Saemangeum and shares his vision for a massive renewable energy cluster. U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Stephen Biegun meets with Seoul's National Security Advisor and the Unification Minister today. The nuclear envoy underscores the importance of achieving peace and stability on the peninsula, primarily through the denuclearization of North Korea. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Cha. An estimated 1.2 million Koreans were forced to work in Japanese industries with little or no pay during the Japanese colonial rule. Many of them got little or no pay, and now, after more than 70 years, some of the victims may finally receive long overdue compensations. After 13 years of trials and appeals, South Korea's top court announced its final ruling. Lee Ji-won has our top story.
South Korea's Supreme Court has decided to uphold a ruling ordering a Japanese steelmaker to pay compensation to 4 Koreans, the company forced to work for it during World War II, when the Korean peninsula was under Japanese colonial rule. Nippon Steel and Sumitomo Metal Corporation will be required to pay each victim around $87,000 for unpaid work. In its decision Tuesday, the Supreme Court said that a 1965 agreement between Korea and Japan did not terminate the right of individuals to reparations. The Japanese government has been arguing that the agreement concerning the settlement of problems in regard to property and claims and economic cooperation draws a line under the two countries' history. In efforts to normalize diplomatic relations with Seoul, Tokyo paid South Korea $500 million. Seoul's top court also took issue with the Japanese court's 2003 ruling that claimed colonization is not illegal and that the use of forced labor was not illegal either at the time. Those notions, the Supreme Court said, go against constitutional values. The Japanese firm had argued that legally too much time has gone by and that it is no longer responsible, but the court called the claim an abuse of rights and a violation of the principle of good faith. To the ruling, Japanese Foreign Minister Taro Kono released a statement expressing deep regret. The ruling is unacceptable, he said, because it fundamentally shakes up the legislative grounds of Seoul-Tokyo ties. He also strongly urged the South Korean government to immediately take appropriate measures, or Japan will do all it can, including an international trial, to defend what he called the Japanese firm's legal economic activities. South Korea, right after the ruling was announced, held a meeting between related ministries and the Prime Minister, where they said the government respects the court's ruling. They also unveiled plans to form a group of experts and officials to form the government's overall response to the ruling, and said that they hope to develop future-oriented Seoul-Tokyo ties. It's expected to be a rough patch for the two countries, but a Japan expert says it could help if the two sides can see eye to eye on their previous agreement.
Yes, part of the money given to South Korea back in 1965 was for the victims of forced labor. But the money was not legal compensation. It was simply part of the money given to South Korea to establish ties and economic cooperation. Thus, because South Korea sees the whole colonization as illegal, the court decided that legal compensation should be given to the victims. If that difference can be reconciled with Japan's point of view, their ties may not become so frosty.
Though only one of the 4 plaintiffs is still alive, there is hope that this could positively affect many other ongoing and potential trials involving Japanese firms and formerly enslaved Korean workers. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
The South Korean government is building a huge renewable energy cluster in Kunsan. President Moon Jae-in visited the area as part of his tour of the country's provinces. Cha Sang-mi has more from the southwestern city.
President Moon Jae-in visited Jeollabuk-do Province on Tuesday on the first stop of his tour to boost the economies of the nation's provinces. To highlight the importance of South Korea's drive toward renewable energy, President Moon attended a ceremony on Tuesday in Saemangum, a coastal area in the city of Gunsan, Jeollabuk-do Province, to unveil his vision for a massive renewable energy cluster by 2022. The Saemangum cluster will contain 3 solar parks and a wind farm, producing a total of 4 gigawatts of power, or the equivalent of 4 nuclear reactors.
새만금 재생에너지 사업에는 전북 도민의 뜨거운 여망이 담겨 있습니다. 대한민국 에너지 전환 정책을 가늠하는 시금석이기도 합니다.
Citing the nation's lagging figures for renewables, which make up just 8% of the country's power generation, the president reiterated his campaign pledge of making the nation greener.
이에 정부는 친환경 에너지 발굴 및 육성을 국정 100대 과제에 포함시키고 2030년까지 재생에너지 발전 비중을 20%로 확대하겠다는 재생에너지 3020 이행 계획을 발표했습니다.
The so-called Renewable Energy 3020 plan is not just environmentally friendly, but will also help create new industries and boost employment. Over the next 10 years, the Saemangum cluster alone is forecast to attract around 100 renewable energy-related companies and create 100,000 jobs. Praising the people of Jeollabuk-do Province and the efforts of the Saemangum Development and Investment Agency, President Moon vowed to invite manufacturing firms and set up research centers within the cluster to raise Korea's renewable energy skills to another level. President Moon said this project will be a good opportunity for local energy firms that are struggling from lack of domestic demand. 차상미, Arirang News.
Today in South Korea is officially Local Government Day, and President Moon Jae-in has vowed to push forward with his administration's plan to decentralize and promise support for local government's customized job policies. Speaking at a ceremony for the occasion in Gyeongju, Gyeongsang-buk-do Province, he said quality job creation is one of the biggest pending issues to which both the central and local governments need to find a solution. The president added that his administration will work to boost the recruitment rate at public institutions in local areas to 30% by the year 2022 and will support mid-sized firms so they can become the center of local development. President Moon also spoke of the government-led innovative city development plan through which the state will invest some $3.7 billion by 2022. The South Korean government will launch a pan-ministry body that will look into any hiring irregularities at public companies. Separately, it will also revise a number of acts to better support the lives of the vulnerable. Here's Kim Min-ji with a wrap-up of Tuesday's cabinet meeting.
The South Korean government will not tolerate irregularities in public sector hiring. Chairing a cabinet meeting on Tuesday, Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun said a pan-ministry body, headed by the Anti-Corruption and Civil Rights Commission, will be established to launch a probe and oversee the matter. The issue was a hot one throughout the weeks-long parliamentary audit of the government, after it was found that a state-run company gave job favors to the relatives of current or former employees in the process of transferring contract workers to permanent status.
I call on the Anti-Corruption Commission to thoroughly investigate central and local public institutions and state-run organizations when it starts its work on November 2nd. If any irregularities are found, they must be dealt with sternly.
The Prime Minister also called for Parliament to cooperate and swiftly complete the formation of an independent panel that will look into allegations of the use of force and rape during the bloody crackdown against the May 18 pro-democracy movement in 1980. The 9-member committee was initially supposed to start work in September, but the conservative opposition has yet to recommend members.
Revealing the truth of the May 18 democracy movement is a public demand, so there shouldn't be a divide between the parties. I ask for the opposition's support so that the panel can be launched quickly.
Also, during Tuesday's meeting, the cabinet approved a temporary cut in fuel taxes of 15%. It will take effect for 6 months starting November 6th and is aimed at easing the burden on small businesses and ordinary people in the wake of rising oil prices. The cabinet also passed a revision to the Industrial Safety and Health Act, which entails higher fines and longer prison terms for business owners if fatal accidents occur because of a failure to comply with safety or health rules. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
America's nuclear envoy Stephen Biegun held more meetings with top officials in Seoul today. During talks with the unification minister, he is expected to have discussed inter-Korean economic cooperation and sanctions on Pyongyang. For details, let's turn to our Oh Jung-hee.
Washington's nuclear envoy continued a series of meetings with key figures in Seoul. U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Stephen Biegun met on Tuesday with the Minister of Unification, Cho Myung-kyun.
It's a very critical moment right now. We'll be talking about how to keep inter-Korean relations and North Korea-U.S. relations in step with each other, so our discussion today is important.
We want the same thing for the Korean Peninsula, peace and stability, primarily through the denuclearization of North Korea. Within that, there are many initiatives that we can cooperate on, and we look forward to working closely with your ministry on those.
The main issues expected to happen on the table are inter-Korean economic cooperation and international sanctions on North Korea. At the Inter-Korean Summit in September and the following high-level talks, the two Koreas have set up several cooperation plans, which include joint inspections of railroads and upgrading tree nurseries in North Korea. Seoul believes that inter-Korean cooperation can push the North towards denuclearization and is therefore expected to have asked Washington to grant exemptions to sanctions. But the U.S. is firm about keeping the sanctions in place until North Korea denuclearizes. In fact, President Trump now says it doesn't matter how long that process takes, as long as there aren't any nuclear tests. Also expected to happen covered is the dialogue between Pyongyang and Washington on holding high-level and working-level talks. It's known that North Korea has not been responding to U.S. proposals for talks, and it remains a question whether there will be any major breakthrough in their negotiations until the U.S. midterms early next month. Washington's nuclear envoy also met Tuesday with Seoul's National Security Advisor Chung Eui-yong. They discussed how Washington is preparing for the second North Korea-U.S. summit and agreed to pursue peace on the Korean Peninsula based on a solid South Korea-U.S. alliance. The day before, Biegun met Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa, Seoul's own nuclear envoy Lee Do-hoon, and the Presidential Chief of Staff Im Jong-seok. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
A slew of inter-Korean cooperation projects slated for October appears to be facing some obstacles. Among them, the South Korean businessman's trip to the Kaesong Industrial Complex and the North Korean art troops concert in Seoul, possibly delayed due to a lack of response from Pyongyang. Park Hee-jun tells us more.
Numerous cooperation projects between South and North Korea that were agreed at the high-level talks earlier this month are running behind schedule due to the North's reluctance to provide a clear response. According to an official at Seoul's Unification Ministry on Tuesday, the planned visit to the Kaesong Industrial Complex has been delayed indefinitely. Around 150 business owners from the South were scheduled to visit the complex this week to review their assets. That would have been the first visit since the joint factory park closed down in February 2016. But with North Korea yet to respond to the proposal, it remains unclear when it will happen. North Korea's art troupe was also supposed to hold a concert in the South within the month, but that too has been put on hold. The official told reporters that Seoul is still waiting for a response from Pyongyang on the specific date of the concerts. When asked whether it will take place in November, the official replied only by saying the two Koreas are working together to implement the Pyongyang Joint Declaration. Other agreements made for the month of October at the high-level meeting, including a joint inspection of roads and railways and working-level talks on health and sports, also haven't seen much progress. Talks on forestry and military cooperation have been held recently, though, suggesting that these areas may be a priority for the regime. The delays in other areas could also reflect North Korea's frustration over a lack of progress that comes amid Washington's concerns over the fast improvement in inter-Korean relations unaccompanied by the North's denuclearization. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Turning to some stock market action. Now on Monday, the Kospi dipped below the 2,000 mark for the first time in 22 months. Fortunately, today, South Korea's benchmark index rebounded. Kim Hye-sung provides a closer look.
After falling for 5 straight sessions, South Korea's main index bounced back Tuesday. The benchmark Kospi recovered to above the 2,000 mark, closing at 2,014, up 0.9% from yesterday's close. The tech-heavy Kosdaq also rose more than 2%, closing at 644. institutions purchased over $457 million worth of shares, which offset the sell-off by foreign investors and local individuals. The recovery in Korean stocks came after the country's top economic and financial authorities vowed to take market stabilization measures. At an emergency meeting Tuesday morning, the Financial Services Commission Chairman Choi Jong-gu said the agency will review a contingency plan and use it to help stabilize the stock market if necessary. The day before that, the FSC said it would inject $428 million into undervalued local stocks. The Finance Ministry and Bank of Korea also said they would draw up measures if market instabilities persist.
The government's announcement did help lift sentiment, but institutions' purchasing of stocks was the main reason for the rebound today. But this is more likely a temporary rebound because foreign investors are still selling Korean stocks and because other factors weighing on the market, including the US-China trade spat, US rate hike, and disappointing Korean companies' earnings results are still there.
U.S. President Donald Trump's interview with Fox News Monday night local time, in which he said a great deal with China on trade is possible, helped turn around market concerns in Asia. U.S. stocks fell Monday on earlier media reports that the Trump administration is preparing to impose more tariffs on Chinese goods. Given Korea's slowing economy and its reliance on exports to China and the U.S., experts say the U.S.-China trade talks between President Trump and President Xi, scheduled for next month at the G20 in Argentina, are set to be the focus for investors in coming weeks. Kim Hye-sung, Arirang News.
Pessimism about the economy among South Korean firms reached a point not seen in almost 2 years. The nation's central bank says local companies were especially worried about the spike in international oil prices. The outlook for November is even more grim. Go Ryuni breaks down the discouraging digits for us.
Business sentiment among Korean firms dropped this month to its lowest level since December 2016. Mainly due to manufacturers' concerns about the spike in international oil prices. According to the Bank of Korea, the business survey index came to just 73 in October, down 2 points from the month before. A reading below 100 means there are more pessimists than optimists. The central bank attributed the fall to especially low sentiment among the nation's manufacturers. Their index marked 71 in October, down 2 points on month and the lowest in 2 years. The biggest drop was in the chemical industry because a rise in international oil prices made raw materials more expensive. For instance, to buy crude, South Korea's benchmark hit its highest price in almost 4 years in the first week of October, to trade at more than $80 a barrel. Sentiment for next month is looking grim as well. A forecast from the Korea Economic Research Institute puts the business survey index for November at 90.4, which is around 7 points lower than this month. The institute says this would not only be the second lowest figure this year, but also the largest on-month drop since June 2016. Companies said the overall decline of Korea's manufacturing industries resulted in fewer opportunities for investment and employment. The institute added that the rising trade tensions between the U.S. and China are driving sentiment down because many Korean companies rely heavily on exports to these two economies. Go Ryuni, Arirang News.
Despite government efforts to boost the number of regular workers, the proportion of irregular employees in the nation reached a 6-year high. Irregular workers' income level and working conditions also deteriorated compared to their regular counterparts. Kim Ji-yeon delves deeper into the issue.
Data released Tuesday by Statistics Korea show the number of regular workers increased in August by a mere 3,000 from the same period last year. The number of irregular workers, meanwhile, shot up by 36,000 to more than 6.6 million. In fact, irregular workers make up a bigger proportion of the labor force than at any point in the past 6 years at 33%. This comes despite the government's efforts to add regular workers in the public sector. One of those policies include giving irregular employees regular positions. The Moon Jae-in administration laid out a roadmap last year pledging to increase the number of public sector jobs, such as healthcare workers and firefighters, by 810,000 by 2022. The same data from the statistics agency show the income gap between regular and irregular workers is widening. Irregular workers earned around $1,400 a month on average, about $1,200 less than regular workers. A year earlier, the income gap was around $1,100. It was also found that only 43.6% of irregular workers have employment insurance, an important indicator of job security and working conditions, and coverage recorded a 3-year low in August. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now. The natural beauty of the nation's mountains are the result of years of careful management and reforestation programs. Experts from developing countries visited South Korea to learn how it looks after forest resources. Kim Da-mi has the full story.
South Korea is one of only 4 countries with a successful history of forest rehabilitation following World War II. In order to learn from Korea's successful reforestation, foreign experts and researchers have gathered in Seoul for workshops and field trips. Korea's reforestation efforts date back to 1950s, when the government introduced the national forest plans and fast-growing trees were planted to prevent floods and erosion. In the early 1960s, about 56% of the country was covered by forest. Today, 64% is covered, an increase of 840,000 hectares. Nowadays, the focus has shifted from tree planting to sustainability. Korea's current sustainable forest management policy focuses on balance between forest utilization and preservation and aims at increasing the amount of natural recreational parks and forests. Not only are forests and recreational parks places for citizens to relax and enjoy nature, but they also create green job opportunities such as forest guides, tree surgeons, and researchers specializing in tree care.
For the first time, I'm seeing a forest hospital. I even haven't heard about it. And all the advancements that is happening, scientifically and technically has a lot to offer for many of the developing countries.
And I'm particularly very interested in how we can learn from your fire management techniques and see how that can be applied back at home, especially your wildfire management techniques.
Korea's extensive experience in reforestation and sustainable forest management will now help developing countries restore, protect, and utilize their own forests. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
Global K-pop sensation BTS is taking a well-deserved break following their sellout tour of Europe and the United States. Even while the boys take time out to recharge, there's one thing that never stops: the band's ability to churn out huge profits. Seo Eun-kyung zooms in on the power of their brand.
2018 has been the biggest year yet for BTS, who've won international acclaim. But their influences is now limited to the music industry. BTS has proved extremely valuable to numerous companies, which are enjoying sales bonanza thanks to BTS-themed products. One of Asia's most popular messenger apps has a bunch of BTS-themed characters called BT21, which are inspired by the band members' drawings of themselves and by their personality traits. Right away, the characters were a huge hit at home and abroad. Stores in Seoul that sell BT21 products are packed with people from all over the world.
Yeah, we just came by to see the characters created by BTS. We really like the koala, Koya.
When BT21 products first went on sale overseas, the flagship store in New York got more than 30,000 visitors, and the one in Harajuku got more than 15,000 on opening day alone. The character's popularity prompted Facebook to add BT21 emojis and AR effect to its messenger service, where they got a staggering 800,000 views in just one day.
The K-pop group is also the face of a range of cosmetics, as companies hope the boy band's popularity boosts their sales.
An up-and-coming Korean cosmetics brand has been working with BTS for 2 years now. Last year, the company released a BTS-themed collagen foundation and a toothbrush, which drew huge crowds to their stores in Japan. And this month, they introduced 47 new products featuring BT21 characters and saw sales go through the roof.
BTS fans in their 20s and early 30s visit our stores a lot.
Despite the economic windfall BTS has brought these companies, there are risks for the band.
Selling products based on certain artists brings big profits in the short term, but oversaturation and overexposure can damage the artist's long-term appeal to fans.
But for now, fans can't get enough and the BTS effect is going strong. 서은경, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, winter seems to have arrived, and we haven't even had the chance to say hello and goodbye to autumn.
That's right. Now, some regions, including Seoul, woke up to freezing readings with even reports of frost in some places. Now, starting tomorrow, the mercury is expected to rise a bit, but it will still be lower than the seasonal norms. Now, although the afternoon highs will rise to the teens, it's going to feel much colder than the actual readings because of the strong wind. Now, Beijing and Tokyo are expected to have similar weather conditions to Korea's Jeju Island, which is generally going to be mild and pleasant. Now, tomorrow morning in Seoul and most regions will see temperatures between 3 and 6 degrees Celsius, while Jeju will wake up to 13 degrees. Now, daily highs over in Seoul is expected to rise up to 13, while Busan and Jeju rises to 16 and 17 degrees respectively. Now, the winter-like readings are expected to continue until Friday, but there are no signs of rain for the time being. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we could pack into tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Wherever you may be tuning in from, thanks for staying with us.